Their next destination was Varanasi, the holiest of the holy cities in India and one of the most ancient strongholds of Indian spiritual culture. Varanasi also revealed to him many social inequities side by side with religious formalism and decadence. Yet Kali Tapasi wanted to look below the surface with the eyes of his master, who had visited this place long before, only to find out the spiritual treasures it still contained. Varanasi is the only pilgrimage in India where roaming monks belonging to all religious sects experience little difficulty or inconvenience in the matter of food, which is available in plenty at various charitable places run by the rich and religious minded. These are generally known as satras or sarivratas, where monks are provided with their food requirements. While staying at the house of Bangalatola, they accidentally met Jogin, Gopaldala, and Dinanath, who were already there. Then all of the monks shifted to a lonely garden at the banks of the Asi River. There was Durgabari at the little distance from where they used to procure their food once a day, spending the rest of the time either in religious discourse or in meditation. While at Varanasi, Kali Patwasi met with two spiritual personalities, namely Swami Vivekananda, the celebrated ascetic of great learning, and the great saint Trilanga Swami, who lived lost in all outward activities and absorbed in the deepest meditation. According to his own admission, Bhaskarananda appeared to him a man of possessing strong reasoning faculty and erudition, but without any concrete realization, and he did not impress him very much. As Swami Abhedananda wrote, since we were fortunate in attending Ramakrishna, who was the arch possessor of all sorts of spiritual realizations, I had the insight to fathom correctly the extent of realization attained by any yogi. With Trilanga Swami, however, it was altogether a different experience. The very sight of this illumined soul reminded him of the Master, who had also gone to him long before. Speaking of his reminiscence of Trilanga Swami, Abhedananda writes, when we went to visit him, we found him lying naked under the burning sun on a stone slab on the steps of the Daswamana Ghat. The steps were so hot that it was impossible for anybody to put his feet on it. But we found Trilanga Swami sleeping there all the while with perfect ease, fast asleep and snoring. We were very much surprised at it. As he was asleep, we returned without talking to him. But the next day we found him at his own place, which was situated near the temple. He was then in an introspective mood. A piece of slate and chalk pencil were there, and we were informed that whoever wrote a question on it, the Swami replied to it, writing in Sanskrit. A glance at him impressed me that here was a man of realization. We put some questions in writing about God. He looked at us smilingly and wrote down the replies, which satisfied our curiosity, and this again reminded us of the high estimation cherished by our Master about the spiritual attainments of this celebrated saint. It was then that once more I realized that one is hardly capable of giving an exact answer relating to God unless he truly knows God. We returned after offering our respectful salutations to Trilanga Swami. Again, they were out on the road. They left Varanasi for their destination in Hardware via Ayodhya and Lucknow. So they walked on foot towards Ayodhya and reached the village, which appeared to them to be prosperous. It was about 9 a.m., and Tulsi wanted to halt there with a view to obtaining some food, to which his companion agreed. They took their bath in a nearby tank, and since it was too early to go out for begging, Kali Tabasi changed his mind and told his companion that it would be better for them to proceed further. It does not look well for a sannyasin to wait for plenty of food in this prosperous village. Moreover, we have not walked much this morning, so let us be on the move and see what we can procure at the next village." But the idea did not appeal to Tulsi, who said, "We shall have to cross at least 16 miles before we can hope to reach the next village." Moreover, it was not certain whether food would be available there, and it would also be difficult to walk in the sun. Then the true monk in Kalitapasi came out with his reply. "Tulsi, you must not forget that God always looks after his devotee. Don't you feel the living presence of our Master at our every step? Let us depend on him, and you will find that all arrangements for food will be done by him. Don't you know that long before a child is born, God provides the mother with her breast milk? So we are sure to find our food at the next village." Only a true monk can utter such words with such force, and our subject was a monk par excellence. He now wanted to test what Lord Krishna had told Arjuna in the Gita about absolute faith in God. If there is a true surrender and an absolute unegoistic faith in the indwelling divinity, one need not feel worry for the future. If we look deeper into the mind of our wandering monk, we would at once find that never for a single moment did he give up his implicit faith in God, as the Master had taught him earlier. It is the soul that thus knows, adores, and offers all its workings in a great self-surrender of the being to the eternal. God is all, and all is the Godhead. It knows God as the Father of this world, who nourishes and cherishes and watches over his children. It knows God as the Divine Mother, who holds us in her bosom, lavishes upon us the sweetness of her love, and fills the universe with her forms of beauty. It knows him as the first creator, from whom has originated all that originates and creates its space and time and relation. It knows him as the master and ordainer of all universal and of all individual dispensation. The world and fate and uncertain eventuality cannot terrify. The aspect of suffering and evil cannot bewilder the man who has surrendered himself to the eternal. To see nothing but the divine, to be at every moment in union with him, to love him in all creatures, and have the delight of him in all things, is the whole condition of his spiritual existence. His God vision does not divorce him from life, nor does he miss anything of the fullness of life, for God himself becomes the spontaneous bringer to him of every good, and of all his inner and outer getting and having. The joy of heaven and the joy of earth are only a small shadow of his possessions, for as he grows into the divine too flows out upon him with all the light, power, and joy of an infinite existence. And we can easily conjecture, as we study the growth and development of the spiritual nature of our subject, that this sort of altruism must have been inherent in Swami Abhedananda from the very beginning of his religious life. They were fashioned and formed by his indwelling spirit, and Sri Ramakrishna, who was a great jeweler, knew it better than anybody else when he had first cast his glance on the teenage Kali Prasad. Did he not discover in the boy a superb spiritual diamond? Did he not say that the boy was a great yogi in his previous birth? And it was but natural that the experiences gathered by him in his previous birth must manifest themselves at every stage of his spiritual life in this new birth. The deeper we enter into his life, the more we learn that as a wandering monk, Kalitapasi wanted to submit himself to all the rigors of spiritual discipline, which radically differs from intellectual discipline. None knew better than he that the way to spiritual knowledge may be rugged, blood-stained, and steep, but there is no other way by which man can enter into its light. What seems to us to be of significance about Abhedananda is that he interpreted what he discovered in the light of his living spiritual experience. It was an experience of great depth, which, as we know, was enriched and embellished by the enlightened teachings of his master. As he later wrote, "Whatever I learnt in the early years of my spiritual apprenticeship came not from the dead pages of philosophy, but from the Master who was the living truth." This admission is significant. Thus, the illumination he had from his Master guided every step in his life as a wandering monk. And this is the secret of the uniqueness of Swami Abhedananda's life as a roaming sannyasin. Thus, he reveals to us the truth that he was a sannyasin in the true sense of the term. Sannyasin who really subjected himself to all sorts of spiritual discipline with absolute faith in God. Now let us see what happened next as they proceeded towards their destination. The story has been beautifully described by him, as he wrote, "As I resumed the journey, Tosi followed me through somewhat reluctantly he was, and the sun became hotter and hotter as we walked on the road on both sides of which there was nothing but wide expanse of dry field, without any tree or shade, and add to this, the road was full of dust, which had then become unbearable due to the scorching heat of the sun. As usual, we were walking barefooted, and so we were experiencing considerable difficulty at every step. I noticed that the eyes and the face of Tulsi had become extremely flushed, and both of us were perspiring. Thus we walked for 4 hours through the scorching sun and dust, and we were thoroughly exhausted when we reached the next village, which appeared to us to be a mere hamlet. We were feeling very much hungry, and our throats were parched with thirst. It was difficult for us to proceed any further, so we took our shelter on the portico of a Shiva temple. It was then 2 o'clock in the afternoon. We noticed that there was only one shop in the village, and that belonged to a Mawari. "Did I not tell you, Kali," said Tulsi angrily, "that the next village lay at a great distance and it would be difficult to get any food there? Now you realize the truth of it. Hunger has made both of us famished, and there is no food here." I consoled my companion as before, saying, "Why do you feel dejected? I mean what I said. The Master will provide us with food." And it actually happened. We spread out our blanket under a shady tree and had some rest. And then I decided that after taking some rest, we would go out in search of food. But Tulsi said, "Do as you like," and he went to sleep. But I did not. I was simply having my rest, sitting on the blanket as I did, and I found, much to my surprise, that a Marwari gentleman came and bowed to me, saying, "Namo Narayan." Standing, he asked if we had taken any food, and I replied in the negative. He then went away and returned with a basket full of food and sweets, which he humbly placed before us. Once again we felt the living presence of the Master, as also the truth of the Lord's promise in the Gita, which then came out of my heart. It said, "I myself bear the burden of those who completely resign themselves to my care and worship, and they that stick to me devotedly." My companion Tulsi also became overjoyed and was thoroughly convinced of the truth. The food being more than our requirement, we distributed the rest among the village boys who had then gathered around us. As they took it with pleasure, we inwardly felt happy. A true sannyasin never makes provisions for tomorrow, and Kali Tapasi was true to this time-honored custom. As it was getting dark, the monks halted there. They wanted to spend the night inside the temple. They reached Ayodhya on the following day. As they caught sight of the holy city, which is the birthplace of Sri Ramachandra, they were overwhelmed with the memories of the distant past centuries and centuries back. Those were the times of the Treta Yuga, when Swami Ramachandra lived and ruled in the city. While at Ayodhya, Kali Tapasi, true to the tradition of wandering monks, pondered along upon the Ramayana and the great empire of King Ramachandra who lived in the past in his imagination. He also listened with devotional rapture to the chanting of the sadhus in praise of Sri Ramachandra. Here he visited all the spots associated with the memories of the great saint, and also went to some akras, the abode of the sadhus, to meet there the Vaishnavas belonging to the sect which worship Sri Ramachandra. They also had their bath in the holy river Saraju. Ayodhya fascinated them so much that they spent 3 nights there. Eventually, they left Ayodhya and proceeded to Lucknow. The journey was performed as before under the scorching sun and through dust-laden roads. Here in this historic city, they were lost in admiration of the splendor of the palaces of the late Nawabs of Oud and of the city's gardens and mosques. So it was not spirituality alone, but art and architecture also that were of equal interest to Kali Tapasi. From the account as recorded by Swami Abhedananda himself, we learn that at Lucknow they had met a Hindustani gentleman who was religious-minded and who provided both of them with a third-class ticket for their journey to Hardwar. "How would you go to Hardwar?" he asked. "On foot. But Hardwar is far away from this place. Would you be able to cover so much distance on foot?" "Why not? We have come on foot all the way from Calcutta to Lucknow, and we suppose we have already covered half the distance to Hardwar. We are quite capable of covering the rest of the distance in the same manner." "But, sir, if I offer you the rail fare, would you mind accepting it?" "Thank you, but we never touch coins. That's our vow. So we cannot accept anything of the kind from you." "Very well, sir, but if I offer you 2 tickets, would you mind accepting them?" "We would accept them with gratitude." This conversation, reproduced from the Swami's own account, speaks for itself. It reveals to us the attitude of a true monk and a true disciple of Sri Ramakrishna. It adds a sort of splendor to his character, which remained almost undiminished till the last days of his life. Thus we see that renunciation became not only an article of faith with him, but also a creed at every stage of his spiritual life. He was really a born sannyasin, to whom the attachment to the world meant nothing, yet at the same time, to whom the world and the regeneration of humanity at large meant so much. His long wandering days of monkhood have therefore a special significance in the study of his spiritual attainments, and this is why we are dealing with this episode of his life in lengthy detail. They are not only interesting in themselves, but also of utmost importance to us as we proceed in our study of Swami Abhedananda's personality. As we have already indicated elsewhere, that the band of young monks who went from Bengal in the closing decade of the last century to various pilgrimages in cities of India, they were no ordinary people. All of them came out of the High School of Spirit that was founded in the dilapidated house at Varanakar. Of course, all of them were then nameless sannyasins, but nonetheless they were the torchbearers of a new ideal, and they were the messengers of a universal doctrine for which not only India but the whole world was then crying to the heavens. And they were to re-establish the long-forgotten truth that the history of India is found more in the dedicated lives of spiritual beings than in books. They are the noble inheritors of a long and effective religious tradition of this ancient and sacred land. Vivekananda and Abhedananda and other spiritual sons of Sri Ramakrishna belong to this class. So the next morning they reached Hardwar station, and here they took their shelter in a dharamsala. In those days, in 1889, this renowned place of pilgrimage was neither so populous nor were there many shops as they are found today. The place was then full of huts and abodes of sannyasins belonging to various sects, and there were a number of charitable spots or satras from where they collected their free food, which consisted chiefly of bread prepared mostly of maize and cooked pulse of kalai, which is a type of curry prepared with vegetables and sweets. In the first instance, we had, writes Swami Abhedananda, our bath in the Brahmakunda, and thereafter we procured some food from a satra. After resting a while, we went out to visit the akras of the sadhus with whom we exchanged spiritual conversation and greetings in the true sannyasin custom. Hardware, surrounded on all sides by hills dotted with green trees, impressed us as no other holy place so far visited had. Those hills are the part of the wide range of the majestic Himalayas. The water of the Ganges at Hardware was transparent beyond description, so transparent that the pebbles below the waters were clearly visible. The greenish hue of the water was charmingly beautiful. Indeed, the half of the beauty of this holy place consisted in the Ganges, where water flowed constantly with murmuring sound. To hear it was to lose oneself in meditation. The monks spent 2 days at Hardware, visiting all the interesting and holy spots there, and thereafter they went on foot towards Rishikesh, and thence to Kedarnath and Badranath, via Lakshmanjuli, and again to the source of the Ganges and the Jumna, known as Gangotri in the pilgrim's terminology. But the journey proved too strenuous for them, as Swami Abhedananda would later reminisce. In fact, the wanderings in the outlying districts of the Himalayas are filled with uncertainties and hardships, besides the apprehension of hunger and thirst. The journey from Hardwar to Rishikesh lay through deep forests consisting of mighty shal trees, which looked as so many sentinels of the surroundings. The warblings of the birds would be heard frequently through them. As Abhedananda wrote, starting from Hardware at dawn, we reached Rishikesh by 10 a.m. We did not feel the least fatigued, and as we crossed the 15 miles, which was full of natural scenery, and which we enjoyed very much, there we took our shelter in the abode of a sadhu who was hospitable to us. As we read his own description, we are led to conclude that the Swami was in his element here, where the very atmosphere breathed monasticism. He was glad beyond measure to hear the murmuring of the sacred Ganges that flowed by and see the distant snow-clad Himalayas. No wonder, therefore, that Rishikesh presented to him an atmosphere of intense prayer and meditation. Since there was no difficulty in obtaining food here, the monks decided to spend a few days in prayer and meditation, and also in discourses on spiritual topics with local sadhus, whom they visited frequently at their abodes made of kuskas, a kind of grass known as tiger grass. These abodes were generally known as jupri. We learn from his own account that while staying at Rishikesh, Kali Tavasi himself erected a jupri inside the jungle and on the banks of the Ganges, and lived there for a few days in meditation, prayer, and study. As he wrote, "Our days were spent in absolute peace and happiness, and the memories of those days are still fresh in my mind, the very recollection of which delights me even today." But the stay at Rishikesh could not be prolonged, for it was then time to start for Kedarnath and Badranarayan. And when Kali Tapasi came to know that already the exodus to this 2 Himalayan pilgrimages had begun, he, along with Tulsi, decided to start for Badranarayan first, and thereafter to Kedarnath.